good.
Diversifying us.
I don't bite, they do.
We do bite.
Good, how are you doing?
Only when provoked.
You too.
Okay.
All right. Dock my pay. Thank you.
How are you?
Good. How about you?
Good.
Thanks for asking. Don't love me no more.
I'm glad you're here, Pastor Martin. I was the only.
I didn't want you to do you like that.
All right, Commission, we have reached 5:30, so I will go ahead and call the Community Relations Commission meeting for November 13th to order. Can we do a roll call, please?
Commissioner Guerrero?
Present.
Commissioner Bravo?
Present.
Commissioner Brown?
Present.
Commissioner Curtis?
Present.
Commissioner Garwood?
Present.
Commissioner Hall?
Present.
Commissioner Martin?
Present.
Commissioner Powell? Commissioner Pakale?
Present.
Thank you. The next thing on our agenda is the acceptance of the journal for the Journal of Proceedings for the Community Relations Commission that was held on October 9th, 2025. Everyone had an opportunity to review those minutes. Do we have a motion to approve them?
So move.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
A motion and a second. Is there any discussion related to the minutes? Okay. Then all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the meeting minutes are approved. We have no public speakers today. We have few things on information only. The first thing is a presentation from the Mayor's Office on domestic and community violence. So Jen will give you the floor.
Thank you all so much for having me here tonight. My name is Jennifer Pasquale, and I am the Director of the Mayor's Office of Domestic and Community Violence Prevention here in Rockford, Illinois. Just very briefly, a bit about me. I am born and raised in this community my entire life. My whole family is also here. I started my career in 1998 in the Winnebago County Attorney's Office, and then ran into domestic violence and Friday.
it was about 25% of the violent crime rate here in Rockford, Illinois. And so Mayor Tom McNamara and the City Council at the time thought, we really need more of a coordinated approach to this issue instead of the siloed, piecemealed attempts. And the city really has an invested interest in addressing this crime, and we think it should be led from the highest position in the community because it is not a police problem. We're not going to arrest our way out of it. It is not a health and human services problem. We're not going to just pull people out of the river. There's all kinds of things that we need to be doing in a multi-layered, complex situation to address domestic and community violence. It was also in response to the understanding that human trafficking exists in our community. It didn't enter our community recently. It has been here as long as I have. It has been in the world as long as anybody here in this room has been alive, and way before then. So there was an understanding. We're starting to realize what human trafficking looks like, right? And so that was also part of the lens that City Council and the mayor was looking through when they decided to form this office. And the first thing that we did, and it was just me back then, back in January 2018, and the first thing that I did was really spend 10 months in our community talking to anybody and everybody who would give me the time of day. I talked to doctors, lawyers, elected officials, judges, public defenders, prosecutors, executive directors, social workers, advocates, faith leaders, grocery store clerks, union members, and most importantly, in my opinion, over 115 survivors of domestic and sexual violence in Rockford, Illinois, and over a dozen persons who were accused of those offenses and in fact were incarcerated for them. And their voices have become our community's strategic plan. I reduced those voices to writing and put together a 15-page strategic plan that to this day remains the data-driven, community-centered plan that our office follows as we develop strategies to close those gaps identified by our community in a measurable way. And so I can't go over the entire document with you tonight. You're going to get a QR code that will take you to it so you can read it at your leisure. But the lessons were really in these layers. When it came to children, they said to us, why aren't you talking to me about this when I'm in 5th grade, when I'm in 4th grade, when I'm in 2nd grade? Why didn't no one tell me that there is violence in language? If my romantic partner or the boy I've got a crush on or the girl I have a crush on starts to call me names, there's violence in words. Perpetrators said to me, why didn't anybody show me a different way? This is sometimes what they were taught when they were younger. Why did no one show me, that there were alternatives to choosing violence when I got upset? And so there was a lot of reflection on get to our kids as soon as possible and don't wait. Also, when it came to educators, our kids are not okay. And they are coming to our buildings manifesting significant trauma that they did not earn. That they are living with every single day, and they're brought into the school buildings, expected to come to the school buildings and learn how to do reading, math, and writing, right? And it's just not something that is going to be done in an effective way if we aren't taking care of our kids and mitigating the trauma that they so often walk into our buildings with. So how can we arm educators with better information and better support and better resources to help our kids? When it came to the criminal justice system, survivors said, for the love of all that is good and holy in the world, figure out a way to prosecute these cases without making me come into that room with the person that hurt me. Child abuse survivors told me that. Adult survivors of child abuse told me that. And every survivor I talked about the unmitigated fear that they experience having to walk into the courtrooms. And so they asked us, you can prosecute crimes that are homicides without a victim. Why can't you all figure out a way to do this without me? And I want to acknowledge that the current Winnebago State's Attorney, Jay Hanley, since he came into office, has completely flipped the script and is now using survivorless prosecutions. I'm not going to go into it tonight, but he has really flipped his data around in the use of monitoring jail calls and using a strangulation supplement, and we are seeing better accountability in the courtrooms now for those perpetrators. When we talk about the civil court system, we talk about the family law court system. If I were to file an order of protection tonight to separate from my abusive partner, and we had a child, the standard in Illinois is to make sure that that abuser has access to my child. Period. Hard stop. The best interest of the child, the idea is that they must have both parents in their life. And I am just here to tell you that that is not a standard that we should be striving for when one of those parents is not capable of having healthy interactions with those children and making sure that they have a safe environment. And so if I go to court to file for an order of protection and my perpetrator or abuser seeks custody or control of my child, that child will be assigned what's called a guardian ad litem, their very own attorney. And Rockford, Illinois, I'm going to give you a sneak peek at one of the slides here, but as I sit here with you all tonight, it's 50% of our violent crime rate, domestic violence is. And in a community where domestic violence is 50% of our violent crime rate, the guardian ad litems who are in charge of making recommendations for placement for our kids are not required to have 1 hour of training on domestic violence. They are not required to have 1 hour of training on child development. They are not required to have 1 hour of training on post-separation abuse tactics that abusers will use when they go into court. Abusers do not stop abusing because somebody leaves. They simply change their tactics and double down. And the court system is something that they have become exceptionally adept at manipulating. And so when we talk about the civil court system, our survivors are asking for better acknowledgement and understanding within those hallways and those rooms for how this violence presents and how it continues when they try to seek help from the court system. When we talk about messaging, it's really the cultural shift that we need in our community. Why, they asked, am I always being asked, why don't I leave? Because I can promise you all, the reasons that they can't leave are immeasurable. And why aren't they asking the abuser why they won't stop abusing me? Why aren't they asking the abuser what they're doing to make sure that they make different choices next time they get upset? Why is the onus on me entirely to stop this violence? And so how do we shift the cultural responsibility for the existence of the violence on the people perpetrating the violence and the systems that allow it to develop and then be sustained? When we talk about systemic racism in marginalized communities, listen, I am a white, resourced woman in the United States of America. And if I choose to leave a domestic violence relationship, it's going to be easier for me than it is a woman of color, a person from an intentionally marginalized community, a member of the disability community, a member of the LGBTQIA community. And so the survivors that I spoke to and the people I spoke to asked for a recognition of those facts and for the system to adjust itself to respond differently and support survivors who may be experiencing those marginalizations differently than they would somebody like me. And finally, in the medical community, what we heard is, listen, the doctors and nurses and medical professionals have this magic tool called HIPAA. And when I go to the doctor's appointment and I'm asked if I'm safe at home and I say no, then they ask me, well, did you take your temperature today? What's your temperature? Have you been running a fever? There's no follow-up if I say no. And they're not using HIPAA to remove the perpetrator from the rooms. If somebody is in the hospital or somebody is in a medical clinic with their victim, they're going to stick to them. And doctors and nurses and other medical professionals have a phenomenal opportunity to arm themselves with resource information and to tell that perpetrator, you can't be in here. It's HIPAA. I don't have a choice, right? And so those were some of the things that our survivors and other people told me when we listened to them for those first 10 months. Again, this is now our community gap document. We expanded that when our office expanded to community violence in 2021. We went back to the community and asked our kids what were the gaps and barriers to preventing community violence from happening. And so we updated that gap document with our kids' voices as well. And so you'll find all of that in the QR codes that I have. I can't talk to you about all of this tonight, but I am going to talk to you about some of the projects we're doing with youth. I'm going to talk to you about our lethality prevention efforts, and I'm going to, of course, talk to you about our Rockford Family Peace Center. So this is what domestic violence has looked like in Rockford, Illinois, and the rates of it, right? And so you can see it's climbed. When the office was being considered in 2017, it was actually about 25%. We ended that year at 29.2% of our violent crime rate. One of the things that I told City Council when our office opened was I needed that rate to go up. Because to be clear, and I still need it to go up, because to be clear, not everyone who needs help escaping from this violence is yet calling for it. We have got to make sure that we are putting the systems in place that can help survivors. And in case I haven't made it clear, let me state it explicitly. Our community is not the problem. Our community members are not the problems. The systems are the problem. The systems that continue to fail our community members when they're trying to seek help or when they're just trying to live. And so my office is tasked with a root cause system strategy disruption to rebuild systems that support our community, and we will be led by the voices of our community. That's our greatest source of data, the voices of our community. And so back to this data point. You can see it rose and has risen, and we are at 2025 about 51% of our violent crime rate is domestic violence. It fluctuates, it goes up. There's always a couple months where it's at 60%, and there's always a couple months where it's down in the 40%, but it averages at about 50%. And so, there we go. Let's talk about our kids. So I'm going to talk to you about 3 items today. Our Juvenile Enhanced Response Team is a multidisciplinary team made up of all of these organizations here. And the first project I'll talk to you about is our Community Healing Center. Our Family Peace Center, how many of you have heard of our Family Peace Center? Oh, good. How many of you feel like you know what it is? Okay, that's fair. So when we opened the Family Peace Center, that's for survivors of domestic and sexual violence. And when we expanded to community violence, our community came to us and said, thank you so much for opening this one location for all of the survivors of domestic and sexual violence. What about our kids that may not have been exposed to that yet, but are just living with violence? And we went back to the community, went to Comprehensive Community Services, and worked with their Youth Policy Council. They actually formed a Youth Policy Council as a result of our listening sessions, and asked them, if we were to open a center where you could walk into one door and be connected to services, what would you want? What would make you feel safe and welcomed in this space? And so they told us, and we wrote a grant. We wrote a federal grant and wrote their vision. And we won the grant. We were one of 7 people in the country that actually won this grant. And so we opened our Community Healing Center over on Irving Avenue. We're in that space with YSN, which is Youth Services Network, the Rockford City Police Department. United Way owns the house. They do not do programming in it, but they do own the house. And we service about 30 to 40 kids almost every day there. The kids are coming to the center. At this point, they're really asking for food. That has become an emerging critical need in our community over the summer, and it has not gotten any better. But we bring in Rockford Barbell. We brought in Rockford Barbell over the summer, who worked with the ages were 14 to 17-year-old young men, and they did mindful and meditation classes with them for the summer. We brought in By Any Dream Necessary, and that's a leadership development program for young people to give them a voice to their advocacy and to help shape their visions and strategic plans to go out into the community and do their own work. And we brought in the Rockford Arts Council, and our kids created a beautiful, beautiful mural on the basketball court in the backyard. The other things that are happening in that center with our navigators, we have 3 full-time persons in that building, and they're navigating our kids. They're getting them and the people that are taking care of them connected to resources that they may need in the community. They're going into schools and helping them advocate for individual education processes, because we need to keep our kids in school. We are expelling too many of them, and we have to keep them in school, because when they get out onto our streets, there's a whole new fight for them, right? There are other people trying to get at them for a whole bunch of different reasons. And so we have to keep our kids in school, because they're not making it out on the streets by themselves. And so that's why it was so important for us to get that educational component into the advocacy portion of the Community Healing Center. It's going really well. We are applying for a renewal. We are also in McIntosh Elementary School with this team. And what I want to tell you, an exciting data point from there, we were invited into McIntosh in January of this year, and they identified a handful, it was about 30, young people that continued to be on a loop for behavioral referrals, and nothing that they were trying to do to intervene was working, and the parents didn't trust them. And so they asked us to come in and start to work with the kids to try to help the kids develop some different tools when they felt escalated or triggered. And we saw a 78% reduction in behavioral referrals for those group of kids in one semester. And so it is why we have been so relentless in advocating with the school district, because we think programs like that should be in every single school for every kid. But we'll get there someday. So that's our Community Healing Center. Our Human Trafficking Task Force is made up, I'm going the wrong way. Our Human Trafficking Task Force is made up of another multidisciplinary team with all of these organizations. And so you can see every major law enforcement agency in the community is a part of our human trafficking team. And we meet monthly, and we come to the table and we do a couple of things. We debrief on cases that have been disclosed. We are in the Juvenile Detention Center deploying a curriculum called Not a Number. We don't tell our kids what human trafficking looks like. We do not arm our kids with the information to understand when this is coming at them. We are completely failing in that. And so by the time our kids realize they're in it, it's just awful. And so when we get this curriculum in front of them, and a lot of them are already in the juvenile detention center, we have had young girls go, hang on a second, that's me. You're talking about me. And so we will then work to get those children as quickly as possible to the Carrie Lynn Children's Center. It is imperative, and we are still working on finalizing this process, that those children are interviewed at the Carrie Lynn Children's Center with a trauma-informed forensic interview, and not at the jail, and not at the public safety buildings, and not at the D1 or D2 or D3 police stations. We want them at the Carrie Lynn Children's Center. And so that's one of the policy changes we're working on with that team right now, and we're really close. We've got almost everybody in agreement. We're getting there. So we debrief on those cases, we talk about policy changes, and now we're working with the University of Illinois College of Medicine to develop a data project, to develop a profile I would like to develop a profile of the purchasers, because to be clear, the only reason that human trafficking exists is because people won't stop buying other human beings for their use and abuse. That's it. If the demand stopped, the selling would stop. And you don't have to take my word for it. Listen to the traffickers, because that's what they will tell you. The only reason they sell humans and not drugs is because it's easier. There's not as much attention on them if they're selling humans as opposed to drugs, because everybody thinks it's prostitution and it's a choice and it's just how things are, and that's garbage. And so the idea is, if we can develop a data piece to show that the purchasers live in Winnebago County, they work in Winnebago County, they hold positions of power in Winnebago County and in every community across this country. They are not hiding behind garbage cans. They are people that walk among us every day. And just start having some real aggressive, and I mean aggressive, conversations with those persons who engage in that behavior and who sanction it and who don't hold their friends accountable for it. That's what we need to have happen in our community. And so that's why we're working on that data set, so we can show people, this is who's driving the demand. We need your help to get them to stop it. And it's not about embarrassing them. It's about holding them accountable. They're buying our kids. They're buying our kids, right? And so that's what those are some of the projects that team is working on. And then finally, we have an educator summit every single year where we've trained at this point in our community about 1,200 educators and professionals who work with kids. It's free. People get certified. Their CEUs, their continuing education credits. It's 2 days. And it is just phenomenal. They get an understanding of what domestic violence is, what it's not, what human trafficking is, what it's not, sexual exploitation, the digital sextortion that's happening to our kids online right now scares me to death. And it really is meant to arm individuals who work with kids with better information about what's happening to them, to also give them resources and tools to help support our kids and get them out of those lines of danger. And so that's our Educator Summit. But one of the things I want to lift up and actually point out your chair for, Eric Brown was part of our domestic violence team for some time before he transitioned over to Rock Valley. And he was instrumental, along with other members of our team, in developing an advocacy strategic plan with Rockford Public Schools to get them to adopt a teen dating violence policy. 51% of our violent crime rate. And there was no teen dating violence policy in Rockford Public Schools. And listen, I don't want to pick on them. They aren't any school district. Rockford now, as of May of this year, has a robust best practices gold standard teen dating violence policy. They adopted it in May, and that is the fruition of Eric's work, so thank you very much, and Andrea Carlson from my deputy director here in the mayor's office. The school district really has turned a corner. They adopted every single page of this policy, and we are now in the buildings training every administrator, and then every social worker and counselor, and then hopefully we'll get down to the teachers. We were just there this week, we'll be there next week, and so we'll start measuring this. We're going to go back after the first round of training and check in with everybody we trained to say, how's it going? Did something happen you didn't think of? Did something happen that you thought would go one way and it didn't, that we can continue to help you? We want to continue to be that technical assistance for them, because they can't be experts in this too. They've got to be experts in taking care of our kids in the building every day. And so we want them to know that they're not alone in this, and they can tag us in at any time. So that's our teen dating policy efforts. Moving into our medical response, this is also pretty robust. We started in our medical response because of some information out of the Family Peace Center. Domestic violence is marked by escalation and power and control. It doesn't end well, and it doesn't get better without significant intervention or disruption to the violence. We know that every domestic violence relationship is potentially lethal. Every single one of them is potentially lethal. And we also know that there are continuums. Some are potentially more lethal than others. And so when somebody walks into the Family Peace Center, we give them an opportunity to learn where they may be on that continuum of lethality on a validated tool. And it's a tool called the Danger Assessment. And it was developed by Dr. Jackie Campbell. She's out of the East Coast and in the Boston area. And she's a doctor of nursing, and she studied domestic violence homicides for decades. And she put together a profile of a very high-risk domestic violence victim. So if these certain factors are present in the domestic violence relationship, somebody's real close to homicide. And so there's a 20-question quiz. We are not going to give that an intake to somebody walking into the Family Peace Center, but there is a Danger Assessment 5 that highlights the 5 most dangerous lethality factors. Do they have access to a weapon? Are they increasingly jealous? Is there stalking involved? And have they strangled you? And the 5th one is escaping me right now, but I can get you that information. Have they been strangled? And the strangled part is what we're focusing on, because we know from the National Strangulation Institute, if somebody is being strangled, they are 750% more likely to die at the hands of their abuser by gunshot. So we often call strangulation the final warning shot. If somebody is being strangled, please, they're in trouble and they need help, right? So we started doing the Danger Assessment 5 at the Peace Center. And then a survivor has an opportunity, depending on where they score on that lethality, to be referred to our high lethality division and to take the whole danger assessment to take the full 20 questions. But what I can tell you since February 2023, consistent through this summer of data, is that 55% of the survivors walking into the Family Peace Center have been strangled, and 74 of them are scoring at high risk of death. And so what our survivors told us at the Rockford Family Peace Center is, I did not know that I could get a traumatic brain injury. I did not know the long-term impacts of a concussion. I did not know how difficult it was going to be to drop back into normal everyday life with the internal trauma that my body has experienced. And we knew we had to do better for them. And so that really is what spurred us in 2023 to take a hard turn towards the medical community. And what we did was we went to Senator Stottlemyre and asked him for some seed money to develop a pilot program with the University of Wisconsin, UW Health Systems at Swedish American. Travis Anderson came into the Family Peace Center, and when I gave him this data, he agreed we had to do something. And so between the funding from Senator Stottlemyre and the agreement with Travis Anderson, we now have 3 strangulation advocates in the emergency room at UW Health Systems. And so they will go direct with survivors of domestic violence, even if they haven't been strangled, when they come into those doors. We have trained doctors. We trained the emergency room departments. We did listening sessions with their nurses and medical professionals for a year before we launched the pilot, because we want to be helpful to them as well. And so we launched this project in February of this year, and it's been tremendous. I will tell you that the trends that we are seeing are very young people coming in strangled. One of the tactics that we are seeing emerging is strangulation and then an encouragement by their perpetrator to die by suicide. So we are seeing people who've been strangled, young people, and then come in after taking a significant amount of pills. The other trend we're seeing are people much older than me who've coming in with significant injuries, who've just been living in the relationship for decades and don't see a way out. And so we are now getting those survivors, when they're done in their medical exam, those doctors are tagging in our advocates and saying, I think there's somebody in here you should check with. And then they can become clients of the Rockford Family Peace Center and get connected to long-term advocacy and support. We're working on a strangulation traumatic brain injury support group so that our survivors can understand what's happened to them. Because what they said to us was, no wonder he would get so mad at me. I can't remember anything. No wonder I would get hit so often because I'm stupid and I can't get things done. And they did not understand what had happened to their brain and why they were struggling so much. And that is a tremendous barrier to not only finding their pathway out of the violence, but also just day-to-day life and being there for your child, right? And so this project is exceptionally important to me because it's exceptionally important to the survivors that come into our center. As part of that medical advocacy, we were also actually reached out to by 2 young students at the University of Illinois College of Medicine who were very angry about the fact that there is no education in their curriculum on domestic violence. They were like, they teach us everything else, and we can't get education on how to talk to a patient who comes into our clinic. And so the University of Illinois College of Medicine allowed us to come in, and last fall, in October of 2024, we deployed the first of its kind multidisciplinary training to the entire student body in the 3Ms, the third-year medical students. And it was a multidisciplinary team in that there was a doctorate of nursing, Dr. Mary McNamara. Joanne Jones is a survivor. She's a member of the Family Peace Center's Survivor Voices Advocacy Group, and then an advocate. And how it goes is I simply present on this is what domestic violence looks like, this is what this is what emotional abuse can look like, this is what financial abuse can look like, and then Joanne says, and this is what I looked like when I came into your clinics. This is how you would have experienced me, and this is what I needed and wish you would have done differently. And then Mary McNamara comes in at the end, and she says, and the laws that require you to document this are these in the medical field. These are your requirements and ethical obligations as a medical professional. And so it's a nice thread, and those are the outcomes. One of the students actually used this as her research project, and you can see the dark blue bars. That's a statistically significant improvement of those medical students' comfort and dealing with a domestic violence survivor who comes into their clinic, and also understanding of what is going on, and also an understanding of resources. We also, as a part of that, then followed up with a standardized patient encounter with those same students. We said, you know, you thought you learned it, you think you learned it, we think you did too, but we're going to test you. And so advocates, not survivors, because I didn't even ask survivors, quite frankly, because I didn't want any of them triggered. We played patients, and we had a fake profile, and we put on our patient gowns and came in for thyroid issues. And so a thyroid issue is going to require a neck exam. And so those medical students then didn't have any idea what the scenario was. They knew there was some trauma involved, but then they had to come in and in live time in front of their professors approach us and try to give us a trauma-informed exam. And it was really cool. These students were earnest, they were exceptionally thoughtful, and they have invited us back. We'll be doing this again this year. We did our second colloquium with the students this past fall, this past October, so we'll be back in the spring to do this next one. And the ultimate goal is the reason we're evaluating all of this is because one of our medical students intends in her 4th year to do a track on curriculum and actually make a proposal that the curriculum at UIC College of Medicine is permanently changed to include domestic violence instruction. And so we can show statistically significant improvements for every one of these trainings, and that's what gives us a good shot to make this happen. So that's the systems change, right, that we're talking about. And so then finally, the last thing I'll talk to you all about tonight is the Rockford Family Peace Center. And so our Peace Center really came about within the first 3 weeks of our office opening. One of the things that struck me was that survivors said to me, your system is jacked up here to Sunday. Thanks for coming when I call 911, but I can't figure out what to do next. I go to 30 different places. I've got my kids with me. I'm not really treated super well when I get there because remember, everybody's wondering why I got myself into this situation and why I haven't gotten myself out of it. So there's a lot of judgment and bias. It's generally the most dangerous time of the relationship because when somebody's leaving, that's when the violence really goes sky high, right? And so could you please figure out a way to do it better? Maybe I can go into one door and you all could come to me. And so we thought, well, that sounds like a really interesting idea. So I kept hearing that from survivors, and then I heard it again from law enforcement. And I had 3 seasoned police officers, now all retired, but at the time, Lieutenant Eric Bruno, now retired Deputy Chief Kurt Wisenhan, and now retired Sergeant Mary Ogden. And all 3 of them told me, if you don't open a family justice center, you will never get ahead of domestic violence in our community. All 3 of them. And we're talking about over 100 years of police of police experience there. And so that got our attention. And so within 3 weeks, we applied for a federal grant to get seed money to open our center, and we won it. And so we won it in October of 2018, 10 months after the office opened. And we are a multi-agency, multidisciplinary, co-located service delivery organization for serving survivors of domestic violence, sexual violence, human trafficking, child abuse, and elder abuse. The important things about this is that it doesn't matter when these things happen to you. If they happen to you when you were 4 months old and you're 80, you can be a client at our center at no charge. It does not matter if you're fleeing. You don't have to be fleeing. The body keeps the score on trauma, and some of us can't deal with it right when it happens. Some of us can get to it about 5, 10, 15 years later. That's your time, not ours, and we're going to honor and respect that. So you are welcome in our center at any time. And there's no time frame. You don't have to get it together in 2 years, 6 months, so on and so forth. You are a lifetime member of our team, and you have a lifetime cheering section from our team if you become part of our organization. And so in that center, we have at this point 35 partner agencies. We are in 11,000 square teeny weeny feet at 315 North Main Street, right across the street from the Coronado. The City of Rockford's domestic violence unit, their entire team, that's where they report every day. They don't go anywhere else. Rockford Sexual Assault Counseling has a full-time therapist on site. Remedies Renewing Lives has a full-time advocate on site. We have then a slew of partner agencies. Prairie State Legal Services is full-time on site because they can consult with our clients. Sometimes you shouldn't get an order of protection, because then you've availed yourself to our jurisdiction. And I already told you what the courts are going to do if I go get an OP. They're going to try to get my perpetrator control of my kids. Sometimes you should just get out of town, right? And that's just that. And so we want them to be able to confer with an attorney before they take any court action if possible. And then when you do have to take court action, we want you to get connected to a really good attorney. So we have Prairie State in there full time, and we also have the Zeke Georgia Legal Clinic, who comes on site with Professor Wendy Lawn from the Northern Illinois University College of Law, and they'll consult. So they can't represent because the semesters turn over and these cases last longer than a semester. So they can't represent, but they certainly can consult and give some idea of what to do next in your case. We also have care for pets. We've had dogs, cats, rabbits in our center. I think that's all we've had. But when somebody's fleeing, they're not leaving their pets behind, because that's usually who suffers when the person leaves, right? And so we work with Care for Pets to get those pets fostered at no charge to that survivor until she or they have an opportunity to rehouse themselves and get control of their animals again. We have RACE, our human trafficking organization, Rockford Alliance Against Sexual Exploitation, who holds office hours there. We have an entire child play therapy room there, because we have got to interrupt the trauma of our kids. The reason our office expanded to community violence is because Deputy Chief Kurt Wisenhand developed a data point that showed from 2016 to 2019, and we have validated this data point now all the way through 2024. 60 to 70% of our kids who are arrested for violent crimes in Rockford, Illinois, have a documented previous exposure to domestic or sexual violence. Period. Unmitigated trauma is driving Rockford's overall violent crime rate, and we know that. We've validated the process that he went through, Deputy Chief Wisenhand, with the University of Illinois College of Medicine, and there's a published study on this now. And they told us what we already knew: get to our kids as soon as possible. But that is part of the reason that we have to have a child play therapy room on site right there at the center. We have got to take care of our kids who've been exposed to this violence. And so I'm just going to give you, and there are all kinds of other organizations in our center. I'm going to leave you with a brochure from our center. So, and to the extent any of you have not been in this, please give me a call so we can get you in for a tour, because it's really, I can talk to you about it all day long, but being it is just something totally different. I want you to know that everything that you experience in our center, from the smells to the look to the feel, was designed by survivors. We sat survivor focus groups, and they built everything in this space. We just raised the funds and then followed their directions. So this is a perfect example. This is our vestibule. When you walk into the center, they couldn't decide if they wanted a picture of a tree or a picture of water. So our artist took a picture of the Rock River, and they got both. And so that's our intake space. That's where they can come in. And we just do a quick conflict check then. Judges give our card out in court, and so we've had perpetrators try to beat people to the court, to the peace center, just a few times. Because once we're representing one client, we can't represent represent the other side ever. And so we do a quick conflict check, and then once you clear that, and that's Mary McCulloch. She's one of our, we call them Falcons. They are the only employee with a cool acronym like that, but it's Frontline Crisis Navigator, so they're Falcons. And so she, along with our other team members there, is the face of who greets you when somebody walks into the center. And so once you get past that space, you are welcomed into our great room. And that's our client space. That's not ours. We don't do tours during the day unless it's something very, very extraordinary, because that's their house during the day. And so we do tours early in the morning or after 5 p.m. That's their kitchen. We don't want them asking us for anything. Help yourself. Make yourself at home. This is not a you have to give us something to get something situation. You don't even have to ask for permission. So just help yourself get what you want for you or your children. And that's the space. 11,000 square space is challenging. For 35 partner agencies, right? And the great room, trying to create a sense of privacy for everybody that comes in was very important to our survivors. So there's 4 different seating spaces that do give at least some semblance of privacy, right? And that's our littles child care space. So when a survivor comes into the space, we have a full-time child care specialist who takes care of our kids. And they are trained to screen for trauma. They then can do referrals to make those children actual clients of the Peace Center. We've served 2,600 individuals since we opened in July of 2020. We opened in the middle of the pandemic. 600 of those clients are kids, because sometimes moms can't get out, and they still want their kids to get help. Sometimes the courts are saying, if you don't bring this child to visitation with this person unsupervised, we're going to put you in we're going to periodically imprison you for contempt of court. And so some of our survivors say, nah, I'm going to stay in the relationship so I can keep my eyes on my kid, but I'm going to make sure my child's in counseling. And so it's so important to have those eyes on our babies and to get them connected to their own resources and to something called Camp Hope, which is a camp for our kids exposed to domestic and sexual violence. There's more about that in our documents, and that's a whole nother presentation, though. And that's our teen space. One of the things that survivors said to us was, you guys do a really good job of taking care of my babies, but I've got a 14-year-old boy. What do you want me to do with him while I'm in the room with you, right? And so we built a teen space. There are phenomenal video games. They get excited when they see these systems. I'm not up to speed with all of it. I think there's an Xbox or something there. But they get very excited to play the video games. Those tables you see there are all whiteboards. They can draw on them and we erase them. There's the ping pong table. There are computers for homework. I don't ever see our kids doing homework, and I don't care. They don't have to. They can just get on those and play. And then there's a little book nook for them to read. And so that's our intake space, and that is one of our phenomenal teammates, Dominique Shihama. Dominique actually oversees our lethality prevention division, which is a whole nother presentation. But that intake room is outfitted with pictures taken by one of our survivors. So those are all framed in that space. And when a survivor comes in for the first time, it's really a triage situation. What are your injuries? We have officers bringing survivors there and their kids from crime scenes. And so we need to make sure that their medical condition is stable. We will often call on Shannon Kopp from the fire department if we need somebody transported to the hospital, or to at least allow them to treat them in the van outside. And so it's really, what's your medical condition? Could you be concussed? Have you been strangled? Because we may need to get you to the emergency room, right? And then once we stabilize that, when's the last time you ate? When's the last time your child ate? We have an anonymous donor who pays our Jimmy John's bill every month. She calls the Jimmy John's bill downtown and says, I'm paying the Peace Center's bill. And so we just order food. They're fast. They know us. They get the food there for our clients and their kids. And then, where are you going to sleep tonight? And that's our biggest challenge. We have a significant gap in housing, in safe, affordable housing. This is not news to, I bet, anybody in this room, right, in general. But for survivors of domestic violence, it is even more pronounced. And so where we can put them is just always, always a barrier. Remedies, bless them. I don't know what we would do without their shelter. They're so often full. They're full. I don't know what we would have done in the past 5 years without St. Vincent de Paul. St. Vincent de Paul has been the angels. They can come in. If I call Pastor Laura and say, we've got a survivor, he smashed her phone in the incident, and I got nowhere to put her tonight, the shelters are full. She's there in an hour with a flip phone, with hotel vouchers, and usually with some food. And so whatever they need, they fly in. So if any of you are Catholic, if any of you go to church on Sundays, if you are tithing, your money is going to St. Vincent de Paul. Please keep giving. And so that's what happens in those rooms. And then the last thing we're usually doing in those rooms is an order of protection. And this is essential. I am exceptionally grateful to the 17th Judicial Circuit for allowing remote orders of protection. When we can do an order of protection from that building and our survivors never have to leave while their child's being taken care of on the other side of the wall, while they just had lunch, while they're making an appointment to see an advocate, while they may be meeting with a lawyer, while they may be giving a videotaped recorded statement in a trauma-informed interview room down the hallway, right? And so when our survivors tell you that the courthouse is the scariest place on earth for them, please believe them. It is unmitigated access. They have to park in the same parking lots and spaces as the people they're coming in to get orders of protection against. They have to walk down the same hallways. They have to take the same elevators up. They have to walk through the same security line. It is terrifying. And that's not the courthouse. It's the setup of the courthouse. And I promise you, if everybody in that building could wave a magic wand and change it all, they would. And you're going to see some of those adjustments be made with the new building of the new Domestic Violence Center, which our Voices team had a remarkable ability and opportunity to inform. The judges came and listened to Voices and got their direct feedback on what that new center should be like in the courts. But for now, we do orders of protection right there. We file it. We call and say, hey, it's Dominique from the Peace Center. I just filed an OP. And they say, here's your Zoom link. Log on at 2 o'clock. And they can do it right there from our center. And so this is an exceptionally important point of data for me. One of the things that I want everybody here to understand is that leaving a domestic violence situation is not an event. It is not an event. It is a process. And we don't know how long that process will take. It is imperative, and we train law enforcement, we train first responders, EMTs and 911 dispatchers, doctors, nurses, and everybody else. You have got to lead with kindness. You have got to lead with kindness because they will need you again. And they will remember how you talked to them on the 911 call. They will remember how you treated them on the street. They will remember how you make them feel when they walk into your social service organization. And we are not doing our job in closing this gap of how they're being treated if we aren't treating them with kindness, dignity, and respect 100% of the time. I know that is a high standard. My team knows it's a high standard. I announce it in every interview because I know it's a high standard. And maybe this isn't for you, and that's okay. It's not personal, but we're not for everybody, I often say, but we are for survivors. And so if you can meet that bar, let's go. And if you can't, we bless and release. It's really okay. But we measure ourselves with how people feel when they walk out of that building every single time. There's an anonymous box at the end of the door when they leave. You can't see what they drop in or if they drop in anything. And all we are asking them is, did you get connected to the services and information that you needed today? Do you feel like your confidentiality was respected and protected? Because there's 35 partner agencies in that building. What I'm not going to do is infantilize survivors and say I'm not going to let those partners in because of confidentiality. I'm going to give the power and control to those survivors to say, do you want them to come into the space, right? So I have to make sure that we're making sure that they feel like their confidentiality is being protected. Did you feel safe in our center? And finally, were you treated with respect? Were you treated with kindness? And out of 4, with 4 being the highest, that's where we consistently rank. What I want you to know about this is that when we got the zeros, we got really high comments. So I think they flipped. I think they meant to give us 4s and gave us zeros, but I'm not changing their numbers. So here they lie. And so this is a significant leading indicator that we are going in the right direction. We are trying to end domestic and sexual violence. That's a lagging indicator that I don't know if I'll get to in my career. But I have to have the leading indicators along the way to know we're going in the right direction, because I'm not doing this just to come here and do this every day. I'm not doing this for every other Friday's paycheck. I could find a simpler, easier, less headachy job to do if that's why I was doing this. And so I have got to make sure that the train is going in the right direction. Our community deserves it, our survivors deserve it, and our kids deserve it. And so just a forecast, that's a picture of some of our team. And just a forecast, the city of Rockford generously bought us the old library building. And so we are moving from 11,000 square feet into 50,000 square feet. We are also moving the entire Carrie Lynn Children's Center operations into the new Family Peace Center building. And so further intersecting the connection between domestic violence and childhood support that is needed, right? And so we are finalizing architecture drawings right now. We are really close to meeting a substantial goal for fundraising. We've got a ways to go, but we're going to get there. That will include all of those 35 partner organizations, and we'll be able to build a bigger child care space. The City of Rockford Police Department's coming with us. They're going into the basement. I keep calling it the mezzanine suite to try to make them feel better, but they're not buying it. But they are going down into the basement. And I think we're also going to be able to get Wendy Vaughn and her team in a more full-time presence in the center. And so look for us to move in there sometime probably in 2027. And this is our location and hours. The QR code will take you to our website. I will really want to encourage you to, check that out. And then finally, I think, yes. So I told you that I've talked about data. We're just data driven. We just will not do any of this without data. And I hope you all have picked up on the fact that when I'm talking about data, I'm talking about quantifiable and qualifiable. The voices of our community are the most important data point that I have to guide me ever. But we also have to look at the quantifiable data too. So when we're looking at that longest term goal of the reduction of this violence, which really looks at our police rate going down, right? The violent crime rate and the arrests for people going down, we turn to NIBRs. We work with Region 1 Planning Council. They're an entirely separate organization from us. I give my data to them raw. I don't do anything to it except give it to them. And they visualize it for us, and they compare it. And they developed a peer analysis for us with 16 other peer communities who are trying to get their hands on domestic and sexual violence and ending it. Oh my goodness, I really blown through that. What I will tell you is that we are outperforming 14 of those 16 peer communities. We are outperforming 14 of 16 of those peer communities. And what it means is there's a baseline for the rates of domestic violence in each community. We should be in Rockford, Illinois, much higher than we are. And those other communities are above that baseline. We're below the baseline now. We are actually showing that we are holding the line on decreasing it and at least not having it go up. The other two, the two that we dropped behind this year, and what frustrates me about NIBR's data is it's always a year behind. So I'm going right now on actually 2023 data. We're just getting the 2024 data. The two communities that outperformed us are in Connecticut, and they have family justice centers. They have 3 in the state. So if anybody's going to beat us, okay, I guess I can live with that. We were able to implement Peoria, Illinois. It is the only other community in Illinois that we could get as a peer community analysis right now, and it's because they didn't start collecting the NIBR's data as soon as Rockford City Police Department did. So that's really we have to make sure when we're comparing ourselves against somebody that we're doing apples to apples, and that NIBR's data is what's important. And so we are also outperforming Peoria at this point. I do want to tell you that QR code will get you to our story map with all of that data in it. It will give you a more detailed explanation of that. Jason Holcomb with Region 1 Planning Council, if you're ever interested in a more deep dive into data, we'd certainly be happy to bring him here to talk to you about that. Jason speaks in a language I can't always follow, but that's why I give him the money. So, and then finally, I just want to acknowledge this is our broader MDT. Every single one of these agencies either sits on a committee or lives in the Family Peace Center with us. This is a village effort. It is complex, it is multi-layered, and it is, to be clear, an all-hands-on-deck situation. And we simply cannot do this without every organization that's listed right there on that community, or on that slide. And that concludes my presentation. So I'm happy to, if it's okay, take any questions. Okay.
Commissioners, do you have questions or comments?
Very detailed. Very good. Yeah. Very good. Very good.
Thank you. There's a lot more, but so I'm gonna hand out. flyers. And then this is all of these QR codes will lead you to a different document. The story map QR code is here. The Family Peace Center video, there's a QR code to that, and that's really impactful. I encourage you to watch it. The community gateway document that I mentioned. The City of Rockford DV policy, I'm sorry, I might be messing up the recording. The City of Rockford DV policy, one of the first things I discovered when we did the gap analysis was we didn't have them. And I was like, we're going to be talking about domestic violence, you guys should have a domestic violence policy. So we passed that. It's copy and pasteable for anybody who would want it. A community needs assessment. Our juvenile arrest study that I mentioned, where we documented that 60 to 70% of our kids are hurting because of this violence. The youth strategies is one that we have developed, and it's just that Jaybird slide that I showed you. I only showed you 3 projects. There are a bunch of other youth strategies. We look at prevention as a continuum. We look at it as pre-prevention. There are certain things you're going to do for kids in the pre-prevention pocket. That's like 0 to 3. Nothing's happened yet, right? Prevention, and then that's a little bit older. Intervention, total intervention, and then, oh my gosh, we're in a crisis. We have a child in the juvenile detention center or in the department of juvenile justice. How do we get to them there? Because we can't give up on our kids when they're in juvenile, right? And so you'll see that continuum chart. Our project chart you will also see with all of our projects. It'll show you who the teams are and how we're evaluating them. Always how we are evaluating them. And then our annual report. So I'll just pass a few of these down to you all to take with you. And again, happy to answer any questions if there are more.
I have one question, if that's okay. So the strangulation. Sure. I just want to ask, because you said the strangulation resource advocates, the people who will come to the ER, you said there's 3 of those. Are those folks on call?
No. We used well, I say no, and then we did go in on Saturday. So we used the Rockford Fire Department transport data to look at the times when most DV survivors were being transported to the ER. And so it's 3rd shift. Okay. We did not have anybody there. We had an advocate. Right now, we're only staffed with 1. We have 2 positions open. We had one, and she left us. It's just not for everybody, right? I mean, in an ER it's tough, right? And so she was younger, and just was like, I thought I could do it, and I can't. And so Anna Grzelek is our project manager for that, and Anna is a long-time advocate in our community. She's worked for all kinds of, she's just worked in this work her entire career. But they called her Friday before the hours with a pretty significant injury, somebody. And so she did go in, but other than that, we're really staffed. I mean, it was a pretty significant injury that we needed to get to.
Do you foresee being able to, once you're able to fill those staffing needs, because I mean, that's it's a tall order, you know, for a staff person. Do you foresee you being able to have those staff people in other ERs in the community, or will it just be where you've started here?
I think that the goal would be to spread the footprint everywhere. I think they should not only be in the ERs, I think they should be in clinics. Or at least there should be somebody in the clinic that's specially trained in it. So we started with UW just because of the connection that we were doing with the medical center and their LP Johnson Center. With the medical school and the LP Johnson Center, which is part of UIC College of Medicine. And so LP was sort of the bridge between UW and UIC. And then, Travis said, oh my goodness, yes, come into my building. And so I believe that the other hospitals would be open to it. This is just where we decided to start. Yep.
Jen, one of the things that we do as a commission every year is prepare a report for the mayor and for council, giving them guidance and suggestions on things that need to be prioritized. We are getting ready to do that work. Is there anything that you all are working on that we need to help amplify to council and to the mayor to make sure it remains or becomes a priority?
Yes. I think the advocacy around the family law court system is critical. I think it is absolutely critical. If I tell you long-term exposure to domestic or sexual violence is driving our violent crime rate, it's counterintuitive to have a system in charge of our kids making decisions that keep them in the line of vision of perpetrators for prolonged periods of time. And so that is a significant gap in our system. And I want to acknowledge the good work of the judges who are listening to me. I will tell you they're at the table. I want to acknowledge all of them. They are really taking these concerns seriously. The system is not, they didn't build it. They're doing the best they can with it. So I really want to name that. And so I'm hopeful, but we can always use more advocacy around that. I think it's important also with our human trafficking work that we are making sure that we are walking in step and with best practices. And so those are the two that initially come to mind. But Eric, my team's right now developing our own 2026 strategic plan. And so I'm happy to connect with Michaela or whoever you see fit to give you some other ideas or even maybe give you more specifics on those.
Appreciate that.
Sure, yeah. I feel like the schools are going okay. I think the other advocacy point is let's see who we have for a new superintendent. But the superintendent has to understand that our schools need to be community schools. I don't know if any of you don't agree with that, but we have got to stop making our community do more, and we have got to stop making our community come to us. Our babies are already supposed to come to those buildings. Our parents are already taking them there every day. Why can't we have services provided in those schools every day? Why are we making moms and other providers who are doing all of the things all of the time and stretched already too thin, make other appointments in the evening, et cetera, that makes no sense. Bring the community to the buildings. And so that is a significant advocacy point that I could name clearly that we need desperate help on. And I am hopeful, now that we will have a new superintendent, that our cries will not fall on deaf ears. You're welcome.
Commissioners, any other questions?
I'm going to leave my business cards too, sure. So if anybody does have any questions you think of that, or if you just didn't feel like asking them, I'll leave them up here with you. Okay, all right. Thank you all so much for your time tonight and for what you guys do. Yeah.
All right, Commissioners, we will move on to the next portion of our agenda, which is a discussion of the tentative schedule for the strategic planning session.
So you guys, in the packet, Larry, it didn't go out in the email, but I did get it printed for you guys tonight. This is very, very tentative, but I wanted to put something together for you all to start looking at so we could build that agenda for our strategic planning session. I did send out the doodle poll. With the holidays, it was really hard to come up with a Saturday in November, December, so there was one Saturday in December. The rest are in January. I didn't see any other potential options really with all the holidays and time off and things of that nature. So if you guys haven't responded to the doodle poll, please respond so we can get that scheduled. But ideally what I would like to see happen is we're going to have like a year in review, kind of talk about some things, challenges, gaps, stuff like that. But the bulk of the session, I think, is going to be us splitting into small groups and diving into some focus areas that we want to talk about in depth. The bottom part of this is what those ideas for what those small group discussions could entail. And the last number are some priority issue areas. So we've talked about housing access, discrimination, language, neighborhood, youth engagement to domestic violence. So all of those different areas. And then what is our community engagement and outreach going to look like, equity and inclusion priorities, all of those things. So in those small groups, we will develop what our goals are, any objectives, our action steps, timelines, and then milestones. What does that plan look like? And then we'd come back together as a group and iron those out, and that would be our strategic plan. I'd like for us to plan out for 3 years would be ideal. I think that would be really great, and then we can obviously update annually, of course, but strategically, I think 3 years is a really good timeline to kind of plan out long-term what it is that we'd like to do, because some of these, it may take a while, right? So that's just a very tentative agenda and discussion ideas. If you guys have anything that you'd like to talk about now about that, if you'd like to review it, but this is kind of what I'm building for the strategic planning session.
Any questions or thoughts now? Thank you for building that. It's much needed.
Yeah.
So we will then move to kind of building off of that. The next agenda item, those of us who have been around this horseshoe for a while know it is about time to submit the report to the mayor and the council. Some of the conversations I know I've had with a few of you in other spaces is just making sure that we are delivering some action steps and some accountability this year to make sure that not only are we showing what we're working on, but we're also saying to city leadership, come back and tell us how things are going. So what I did, and I will get this to you all in the next few days with direct links to the points on the agenda from the last year where we discussed these things, but just kind of highlighted some of the things that we've talked about, and we don't have to necessarily have action steps tonight, but just wanted to kind of get you all to start thinking about, as we're writing the report, are there any action steps that we want to take? Are there any specific action steps we want to give to council to tell them to take? And what other information do we need to be able to give a robust report at the end of the year that shows action moving forward? So just to kind of look at it, so you all remember when the year started, we had some conversations with folks from underrepresented communities, and they talked about how there were gaps in services, feeling like not every agency talks to each other, and kind of like what Jen shared, that people are having to go to multiple places and have multiple conversations and talk about those issues. So I guess my question with that one is, how do we support as a commission? What are some ways that we could creatively think through, or best practices that might be out there that we can support filling those knowledge gaps? We've heard from other folks throughout our year that there are supports out there, that we have services, that the services are available. Our community has not heard that message, right? I think mental health is a really good example of that. One of the things that we heard at the underrepresented panel was folks not knowing where to go to get mental health support. Jason was just here a couple months ago and shared all of the great services and supports that are available in our community. How do we fill that knowledge gap? So just, thinking through, and if there's answers tonight, we can get them on the record. Otherwise, as we start to develop the plan moving forward, really thinking through, how do we do that, or how do we tell the council this is what needs to be done? Increasing communications in more languages. I think we also heard from some of the panelists that, the city does a good job of communicating information, but if I understand the language that they're communicating in. So again, thinking through, are there other communities that do a better job with that communication? Is Rockford doing what it can do? Are there things that we as a commission want to suggest towards that? We've heard for the last 2 years now the gaps in housing. And, I think specifically this last year we heard from folks from marginalized communities, specifically like the LGBTQ community, that there were not crisis shelters or informed folks. So again, thinking through ways that we can, as a commission, make recommendations or suggestions to move things forward. We've heard a lot, too, about different ordinances and how those ordinances are a barrier for some of our community members. So one of the thoughts that I've had is that maybe we need to spend some time actually looking at those. Maybe we need to, I think we've heard that certain ordinances are the barrier. Maybe we need to bring those folks in that drafted those and bring those city leaders in and say, explain the ordinance, help us understand. Maybe we need to read the ordinance and then find some best practices that can eliminate some of those barriers for our folks. I think a lot of the ordinances that we heard from were directly tied to housing. So we may want to take a look at how we can do that. Again, affordable, accessible housing. Discrimination, we heard a lot around discrimination when it comes to housing and employment. And, I don't know if it makes, if we could potentially, maybe we start holding more than these listening sessions, but maybe we start promoting trainings on discrimination, like fair housing training, or those sorts of things, so that our community has a space to come to where they're getting the information. Yes, they're hearing it when we're together, but are there spaces that we could help sponsor some trainings or encourage the city to use some dollars to bring trainings to our community around things like employment discrimination or housing discrimination? What are some other things that you all, in the last year, what are some things that you all have heard that that we need to put in the report? But again, the idea is, what is an action step that can go with it? And you don't have to have that action step tonight, but what are some things that really stick out?
We had a couple people come, also we need to address that.
Yes.
And I also think that we need to encourage that more, because I'd like to see a case. I'd like to see something. Like when I wasn't on the council, on the commission then, but what about the police cameras, that kind of stuff. Something that, like you said, what is this commission producing? What's the help? What's the connect? So I think that going back to the couple, I can't really say that I remember that the people that did come to speak, that we addressed that and see if we did any answering or any connecting there. I get kind of disappointed when the community doesn't come to say something. You hear it maybe out there, but they'll not come here. And this is, I think, the vision and the goal for the commission. So I'd like to see us, because now we have a lot of information that we could even, give to someone that has a situation. So I don't know how to do that to get more people to come, but we do have to circle back and not just like it didn't happen. Did we answer that person? Did we connect them to the right places?
I think you make a really good point. I know there was a couple of folks that came in, and I know from talking to folks on city staff that those issues were likely very quickly addressed, right? But did we get that report back, right? Did someone come to us and say, those folks that met in the audience last month, we solved it within a few days? So maybe it's, building in that if the community brings us something, we as a commission are going to start setting the expectation that whoever we hand that to will come back to us within that month or 2 months.
Like the lady with the, I think I remember now, with the water going in or something. Did that ever get,
Yes, Attorney which did address that, email her, connected her with our Public Works Department, and all of that was handled. One of the things that is on this is how you all would like that communication process to flow. In an ideal world, when they are bringing things to the commission, I would prefer the commission respond. Yeah. Whether it's Eric communicating with myself and maybe one of the attorneys or Public Works, and we have a conversation. But if they're addressing the commission, I think the commission needs to be the one that responds. How we've been handling it is it's been city staff, but then you guys aren't privy to that, right? And also when it comes to the Open Meetings Act, it gets a little convoluted to be able to reply all. We can't do that. So what does that look like? That is one of the discussion topics I'd like to see happen in our strategic planning session, and really iron out that process and what that looks like, and how you guys want to communicate. Yeah.
I believe that if in a previous meeting it's been addressed, then it should be a part of the next agenda.
Sure.
To do the follow-up.
Sure.
So that we know that if in January this was something that was discussed, then we can at least have a follow-up on it. It may not be completed, but at least we have a follow-up so that we kind of know what's going on.
That's a great suggestion, yeah.
I also wanted to bring up regrow. We had a couple discussions about regrow and how we should be able to have follow through with regrow. One was maybe a commissioner assigned to that regrow grant, and we're able to go and visit and, you know, ask questions. That way, when it does come around, we know exactly, one of us were responsible to see exactly what was going on with regrow. So I know that was one of the things that we kind of discussed a couple of times.
Yeah, I would absolutely endorse that, and maybe to have more than one commissioner, you know, just make some regular visits to be helpful, not to be a cop, you know, but just to be helpful, to establish a relationship, to put a face on it. And to the point of regrow, and this may run into public meetings, you know, a public meeting, I feel like I don't really understand some of the, you know, some of the terminology or the background of some of this. There was a guest column in the newspaper on November the 7th by Christopher Sims about the regrow grants potentially being in jeopardy as the city attempts to close a budget gap. I would have loved to have had some information from the city. I understand why the city doesn't want to do a kind of a, you know, a back and forth on this. But on the other hand, as a commissioner, as someone who, you know, who looks at those grants, I feel like we really should have had some information about that. But again, I understand what the public meetings, you know, laws are, but I just felt like I didn't really have the information myself to either, you know, to make sense of what the guest column said.
I waited until it was on the other side, but since she opened it up, I do have a concern in regards to the budget in relationship, because the regrow grant which is from cannabis. First of all, when we look at it, the implementation was to deal with the war on drugs in these particular neighborhoods. And I'm very concerned that I'm sure that the city knew that we were going to be in the red before we got to this point. There was not an issue when the city council approved the $15.5 million Davis Park, but it's a problem now that we have to take from the cannabis sales that deals with the black and brown community to offset the budget. And I think we need to look at that also, and I share with her, my fellow commissioner, that there should have been a task force brought together. We do task force for everything else. And it should have been a task force brought together to kind of deal with this. It should have been listening sessions as well. And we as a commission, since we sit on this council and look at these things, should have had some level of data in relationship to the different grants that were distributed and how those communities were impacted by the funding of the city. But just to blatantly take it as if that money was a slush fund for the city, I think is deplorable. And I think that if I was on city council, I wouldn't even pass that budget.
I couldn't agree more. I think, especially to your point of, as the commission that looks at those applications and makes some decisions, someone should have given us at least a conversation around what was being considered with those budgets, right? And I think we also heard, anybody who listened to council this week, we heard folks saying they didn't know where the funds were going. They didn't, right? So to your point, there should be more open conversation. We know, because of the work that we're doing, that the money is going to organizations that are coming up with great proposals. But if the community doesn't know that, we need to do more. Right? So I couldn't agree more, and I think, you know, I don't know, I guess for city staff, I know we're close to budget conversations having to happen, but is there something that someone in leadership can send to just kind of help us if people come to us and say, where is this decision and we know you're involved? Like, is there information that we can receive?
Are you speaking about regrowth specifically, like that funding source, or you think the overall budget? Because I know Carrie did the presentation for us. I think as far as the actionable items for the city, I think the recommendation of task force for things like this when there's a deficit could be a really great recommendation, right? What is this a best practice that the city could implement for circumstances like this, to look at all of the possible sources? I think that that's a really great action item or recommendation, right, as part of our annual report. I wasn't at that council session. My understanding, and don't hold me to this, right, but I do think that there are still funds available from the state to be able to continue the regrow efforts. That regrow is not off the table when we're using these funds to fill that deficit. That's my understanding. I haven't been in some of those conversations though, so I can't speak to that 100%, but I can absolutely have somebody from leadership be able to address that concern more directly for you.
I do, so I'm not going to remember the exact numbers, but I do remember from that discussion earlier this week that there is at least a dollar amount that will still be towards regrow in the way that we're used to seeing it. But I think it would be helpful if leadership, especially if a vote is happening in the next week, if leadership could send something to us so that at least we can address folks that come to us and ask questions and continue to hold accountable. And if there are dollars that are being kept for that purpose, that they remain for that purpose. Is there anything else related to this topic, regrow, or any other things that we want to make sure are on our report to the mayor and to the council? And again, I want to focus this year's report not on this is what we've done for the last 12 months. Like, this is what we've done, and here is what our suggestions are, and here is what our expectations are for the people that we're writing this report for. For those of us that have been on this council for a while, you all remember when we started, it was a lot of us doing some of that heavy lifting and creating real change. I think it's time that we get back to that work.
We had a discussion with the housing, and I know there was an issue, and we kind of pushed it under the rug because of the lawsuit between the county and Rockford. I would love to see where we are with that, because I know we had one side.
We did.
We might have had the other side too.
There was an attempt made to bring the other.
I did, and they were not available at the times. And then we had the panel discussions and things of that nature, and other reports coming in. But if you'd like me to extend the offer again to come, I'm more than happy to do that, because we've heard from Winnebago. We have not heard from Rockford.
Yeah, because we want to be able to be informed of what's going on. We don't need to go into the ins and outs of the suit, but at least when it comes down to the housing and the vouchers and all of that stuff, it would be great. We just received, it was just on the news today in regards to the drastic housing crisis that we're in, and so I know that that's one of the issues that we're facing. So that's all.
I did have an item, and I don't think anybody's brought this up yet, but one of the community members that talked to us was about environmental items and recycling and things like that, and that businesses have to pay in order to recycle. So I don't know if somebody could come up with an actionable item for the city or a formal recommendation for a policy change around that, but I know that that was something that kind of resonated with some of our commissioners. I know it resonated with me when I realized that they have to pay in order to recycle. It's not a very big incentive to do that, so I think that would be another great item for the commission to make a formal recommendation to the city on.
Absolutely. Thank you. Commissioners, anything else? We will then move on to commissioners' reports. I want to start, though. I know that we've seen a lot of change around the horseshoe, and sometimes we know when change happens, and sometimes we don't. So I just want to be transparent that we did get a resignation from Commissioner Lindeval. Commissioner Lindeval has a lot going on, very busy in the community, doing amazing things. So we have 2 openings currently on the commission.
I'm sorry, Commissioner who?
Lindeval, Jordan Lindeval.
Lidval. Oh, okay, great, thank you.
You guys have recommendations for people that can be appointed? That would be very, very helpful as well.
Commissioners, any commission reports? Start over there and just go around. No report?
No report, but happy Thanksgiving.
What constitutes a report?
Anything that you would like to share with the commission while we are here?
Well, I did attend the Eliminate Racism 815 meeting last night, and we talked about a lot of different things. But one of the things that came up, and I think Jennifer kind of hit on it a little bit, is communication, and we've kind of talked about that here too. People in our community, marginalized people in our community, really don't have, a lot of them don't have the means to find out communication. They're, what they talked about would be like a one-stop shop where people could go and just find out about mental health services, about transportation, you name it. And I think they met with the mayor, and they kind of came away with the idea that the job would require another staff member, and it just wasn't in the budget. But I just wonder if there's anything, if this would be an actionable item for the commission to try to come up with, first of all, the agencies that people would need to be in contact with, and then how we can go about getting that out to the community so that people would be able to just go to one place and find all this information. So that was my takeaway from the meeting last night. So.
And Eric, I think that came up a couple of times
Did.
with the roundtables we had the whole year. So that might be definitely something that we should put as an action item.
Did the meeting that you were at, did they have, so you said that they met with the mayor, and it seems like it's a staffing issue. Did they have ideas, though, on what that would even look like? Is it?
No, not really.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we may need to help build out what that looks like.
Yeah.
Look at some other communities and see how
It wasn't
they're
like
communicating.
the mayor was not in favor of
Sure.
it. We thought it was a great idea.
Sure.
But as a city, we just don't have the staff.
It's a staffing and a budget issue, right?
Yeah, right, yeah. So they trying to come up with some idea or some plan to, because they really felt it was important. And I think it is important too. I mean, if there was just one place you could go to just find out everything that you needed to know about services and agencies that can help and that kind of thing, I think that would be a big help.
So, Commissioner Garwick, I just want to clarify, this one-stop shop would be a phone call, would be a website, would be all of the above? What would be what would it look like?
Well, I think all of the above.
Okay.
I don't know that I wasn't involved with the group that did the research, but so I don't know what their final thought was. But I think it would be all of the above.
I think that's an issue not just for marginalized communities, but
Yeah,
it's an issue for
sure.
everybody, right? It's really hard to sort it out.
But I think the marginalized communities are affected
Disproportionately.
much more
Absolutely.
than,
And I think, just hearing you say that made me think about even just another barrier that we've heard about a lot was related to transportation in rural areas of our county. We, though, in Winnebago County now have Regan Mass Transit District doing rural transportation. How has that been communicated to the residents of rural Winnebago County? right? I know about it because of what I do on a daily basis. I hear about it, but you know, those sorts of things, that one-stop shop of, okay, if I'm in the city of Rockford, I'm using RMTD. If I'm in rural, I'm using this other service, and now they have access to things. So how do we make sure that when these new services happen, do we bring these folks to our commission, have them share with us, and then we give it out to the community? Are there ways that we can leverage our abilities in those marginalized and non-marginalized communities as well?
It can be as simple as the City of Rockford's website with a tab that has all of these links, so that with brief descriptions, so that you can just hit the link and go to where you need to go, because I think we've had many conversations in regards to just the communication. I'm really looking at the screen right now. There's several organizations on here that I have never heard of a day in my life, and I'm in the community. I know I'm in the community, but I haven't seen half of these groups, so a portion of them anyway. So I know we have a lot of stuff that's going on in our city, and I think that even if we started doing something as highlighting an organization, from Facebook to things like that, so that people can kind of understand. I literally just met with a gentleman from NAMI today in regards to getting something, a mental health symposium in my area of where I serve, but a lot of people don't even know about that organization. And so if we can just start to, even as a commission, just come up with different ways that could be inexpensive. I think adding a tab onto a website and doing some stuff virtually could be a little bit more easy, and we can communicate it that way. And
Pastor Martin, you're right, and the folks that just gave us a presentation are part of the city. So if that model works for them, where all of these organizations are, in one place and connecting, there has to be a method to be able to get that information out to the community, right? It's working in one of the spaces that we're working in. And so, to your point, maybe it's highlighting those organizations, it's the city putting it on social media or putting it on the website to highlight all of the great work that organizations in the city are doing. Any other commissioners' reports? Anything from city staff that you all haven't shared? Okay. Well, with that, then, I will take a motion to adjourn. We have a motion and a second.